Hi, y'all. I'm Madie Bateman. I'm a junior here at the University of Arkansas, and I currently serve as the coach of the freshman community group. Today, I'm going to tell you about how Jesus has truly changed my life. I grew up in the church, and I was saved when I was 7 years old. And when I look back on those childhood years, they were truly just marked by a love for Jesus. I can't help but think of the childlike faith that Jesus talks about in his Gospels. I didn't struggle with disbelief. I didn't have doubts. I just believed what Jesus said in his scriptures, and I trusted in his love for me. And none of that really changed until I was 13 years old, and I was sexually assaulted by an adult that I trusted a lot. While that happened at 13, I didn't tell anyone until I was 17 years old. And instead of faith and love for Jesus, those 4 years were marked by isolation, anxiety, depression, and honestly just believing the lies of the enemy. I didn't understand why such a good God would allow bad things to happen to his children. And my plan all along was that I would never tell anyone. But when I was 17 years old, my mom came to me just concerned about the way I was living. It was clear that I wasn't mentally well, and that whole isolation thing wasn't working out for me. For some reason in those moments, I just decided I would tell her what happened. By the end of that day, most of my family knew, and I thought that that might bring some sort of healing to me. And while my family was so comforting and I was no longer in isolation, it didn't really change much about the chains that were weighing me down. In this process, I started seeing a counselor, and counseling was so great and so helpful, but it wasn't healing for me. Please don't mishear me. Counseling is awesome, but how was I to be healed if I was neglecting the healer? I ultimately came to a place where I decided I just needed to be content with what I had. I thought the chains that were weighing me down were permanent, so I just wanted to make the best out of it. I came to college, and I knew I wanted my heart to be back on fire for Jesus. I moved into my dorm on a Saturday, and then the next day, that Sunday, I went to cross church by myself. And lucky for me, they were doing growth track that day. So by the end of my second day in Fayetteville, I was a member of Cross Church, and I was so confident that I was right where the Lord wanted me to be. Now that I was taking my faith seriously, I knew that I wanted to spend my summer serving the Lord, and so I applied to be an intern at a church camp called Big Stuff. I went there when I was in junior high, and I had seen the Lord do such a mighty work, and I was just really excited. Before I knew it, I was on a plane headed to Big Stuff for this summer. And I was so excited and so expectant for what the Lord was going to do in the campers' lives. I had no clue what he was going to do in mine. Something I didn't really realize when I applied for the internship was just how important the aspect of community was. There were 17 other interns there who were all college age, all faithfully following the Lord, and we spent our first few days bonding because we're about to spend 5 weeks together. And one evening, we were prompted to go around the circle and say the biggest hurt of our lives. I knew what the biggest hurt was, and I knew that it happened when I was 13 years old, but I was preparing some other story that I was going to share with them. At least that was my plan. As the story went around, the circle went around, I saw all these people I had only met a few days ago sharing big, true, and deep hurts, and their vulnerability burdened me to do the same. So when it was my turn, I told them my biggest hurt, and I told them what happened to me when I was 13. As I wept, I was met with open arms and a support that I never could have imagined. Time at camp with those 17 best friends of mine went by so fast. And due to the structure of camp, we just repeated the same schedule every week. And my favorite part of that schedule was a prayer and worship service that we would do. Essentially, the worship team would play a song and then play instrumental and give the campers a prayer prompt. And the room would just be filled with prayers, and that would repeat throughout the service. And up until the last week, I loved this service so much because I would just sit back and I would watch the campers pray, and I'd watch the Holy Spirit fall on the room. But the last week, I decided that I would participate with them. And we went through a few, and then we were given the prayer prompt, pray over the lost people that you know. And so I was on my knees before the Lord, and I began to think of who I was going to pray for, and suddenly their name pops in my head. The person who hurt me at 13, and I was honestly so frustrated that I had to think of them in such a beautiful moment like that. And so I just tried to push it out of my head over and over again, but it just wouldn't budge. And that's when I felt it, the Holy Spirit urging me to pray for this person. And so I was just confused. It was bizarre. It's something I never would have thought of on my own, but I did it. I was on my knees before the Lord. I had my hands out surrendered, and I just prayed. I asked that the Lord would save this person, that the Lord would transform their life, and that by God's grace alone, I would see them in heaven one day. And in that moment, I felt a real physical weight just lift off of me. And it became clear to me that all along I was carrying a weight I was never created to bear. You see, Bateman cannot stand the weight of chains, but Jesus Christ can break them, and he did. All along I was looking for a way to heal myself, and that day I went straight to the healer. John 8:36 says that if the Son sets you free, then you are free indeed, and he has set me free. I can still remember the song that was playing in that moment. It's called God of Revival. It says, every stronghold will crumble. I hear the chains hit the ground. God of Revival, pour it out, pour it out. Heaven came down on that room, and I'll never, ever forget it. And the next day, I got to tell those other interns what had happened. And as I wept tears of joy, they wept with me. I look back on this and I just see a beautiful picture of why the Lord calls us to be in community with one another. So when I came into my sophomore year, I knew that I needed to take community seriously. I got very involved at my public house, and then the next semester I started leading community group. And this semester I had the honor and privilege of leading the freshman community group. Finding and being a part of the community that C3 has to offer has been such a blessing. I'll just leave y'all with this. Seek out community. The Lord has created you for it. Run into the arms of the healer. His loving embrace can do more than you could ever imagine. Thank you.